The rain tapped against the window of Abigail Underwood's office, a rhythmic, persistent sound that was usually comforting. But today, it felt different. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper, the silence more profound. She sat there, a solitary figure in the dimly lit room, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting a warm, golden hue over the scattered papers and her half-empty cup of coffee. Abigail leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting towards the clock. It was almost time to close up for the day, the dwindling appointments a rare respitus in her usually hectic schedule as a psychotherapist. She seemed closing her eyes for a moment, relishing the tranquility. Then the phone rang. It cut through the silence like a sharp blade, startling Abigail. Her eyes snapped open, and she reached for the phone with a slight tremor in her hand. "Dr. Underwood speaking," she answered, her voice steady despite the sudden unease that gripped her. "Dr. Underwood, it's Ashley," came the reply, the voice on the other end quivering with barely contained panic. Abigail recognized it immediately. Ashley, her patient for many years. But never had she heard her sound so distressed. "Ashley, what's wrong?" Abigail asked, her professional calm taking over. I need to see you, Dr. Underwood. It's urgent. Can I come over now?" Ashley's voice was a mix of desperation and fear, a stark contrast to the usually composed young artist she knew. Abigail glanced at the clock again, her plans to return home early fading away. "Of course, Ashley. I'm here. What happened?" There was a pause, a breathless, heavy silence, and then Ashley whispered, "It's happening again, doctor. The shadows, they're moving, and the whispers, I can hear them again." A chill ran down Abigail's spine. Ashley had spoken of these shadows and whispers before, figments of a troubled mind, she had presumed, but the fear in Ashley's voice was palpable, real, and it unsettled Abigail more than she cared to admit. "Come over, Ashley. I'll wait for you," Abigail said, her voice now a soft, reassuring balm. The line went dead, leaving Abigail alone in her office once more. The rain seemed to intensify, the tapping now like insistent fingers drumming on the glass. She looked around the room, the familiar space suddenly feeling foreign, the shadows lurking with unseen threats. The phone call had transformed the quiet office into a place of foreboding, a prelude to something sinister. And as she waited for Ashley to arrive, Abigail felt the tendrils of fear and unease tightening around her, the once comforting silence now a heavy, oppressive cloak. The door to Abigail Underwood's office creaked open, breaking the oppressive silence that had settled in the room. Ashley stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the dimly lit hallway. Her face, usually bright with the vibrant energy of a young artist, was now pale, etched with lines of fear and exhaustion. "Dr. Underwood." Ashley's voice was a hoarse whisper as she stepped into the room, her eyes darting around as if expecting the shadows to leap at her. "Ashley, come in," Abigail said, her tone steady, trying to infuse some calm into the tense atmosphere. Ashley moved hesitantly, her steps tentative as she approached the chair opposite Abigail. The office, once a sanctuary of healing, felt like a stage for a macabre play under the watchful eyes of the looming bookshelves and the persistent rain outside. "Tell me what's been happening," Abigail prompted gently, observing Ashley's trembling hands. "It's worse," Ashley began, her voice quivering. "The shadows, they move when I'm not looking, and the whispers," she trailed off, her eyes wide with terror. "They're getting louder, Dr. Underwood. I can hear them even now." Abigail frowned, concern etching her features. She had treated Ashley for anxiety and hallucinations before, but this level of fear was unprecedented. "Can you describe these whispers?" Abigail asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "They're indistinct, but menacing, like they're discussing something about me." Ashley's eyes filled with tears. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." Abigail reached out, her hand touching Ashley's in a comforting gesture. "You're not losing your mind. We'll get through this together." "But there's more." Ashley hesitated, biting her lip. "Things in my house, they change places. Objects disappear. It's like something is living there with me." A shiver ran down Abigail's spine. Rationality told her there had to be a logical explanation, but the raw fear in Ashley's voice was unsettling. "Have you seen anyone or anything unusual in your house?" Abigail probed, trying to maintain a clinical detachment. "No, never. That's what's terrifying. It feels like I'm being haunted by something I can't see or fight." Ashley's voice broke into a sob. Abigail was silent for a moment, weighing her words. "Ashley, I believe you're experiencing a heightened state of anxiety, perhaps a reaction to stress. I'm going to prescribe a mild sedative to help you sleep." Ashley nodded meekly, wiping her tears. "I just want it to stop, doctor. I want to feel safe again." As the session drew to a close, Abigail couldn't shake a creeping sense of doubt. Ashley's fear was infectious, and the storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil within. She watched as Ashley left, her steps slow, her shoulders hunched as if carrying a heavy burden. Left alone, Abigail pondered the situation. Rational explanations clashed with the haunting fear in Ashley's eyes. The room felt colder now, the shadows more pronounced. Outside, the rain continued its relentless symphony, a soundtrack to the growing unease that filled the once tranquil office. The door to Abigail Underwood's home closed with a thud behind her, the sound oddly final, as if sealing her off from the outside world. She leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering unease from her session with Ashley. "Rough day?" came a voice, deep and familiar. Abigail looked up to see her husband, Kevin, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, a look of concern etching his features. "Just unsettling," Abigail replied, forcing a smile as she walked towards him. Kevin, a doctor, had his own share of harrowing experiences, but tonight it was Abigail who seemed haunted. Over dinner, a meal cooked by Kevin in an attempt to bring some normalcy to their evening, Abigail found herself opening up about Ashley's case. The dim light of the dining room, coupled with the relentless rain outside, set a somber mood. "She's convinced that something is living with her, unseen," Abigail said, pushing her food around her plate. "Moving things, whispering. It's like she's trapped in her own horror story." Kevin listened intently, his eyes reflecting the soft light, giving him an almost ethereal quality. "But you think it's just her anxiety manifesting these fears?" I don't know," Abigail confessed, a rare admission of uncertainty from her. Her fear felt so real, so palpable, it's hard not to get drawn into it. They ate in silence for a moment, the only sound the steady patter of rain against the windows. Kevin finally broke the silence. "Maybe she needs a different approach? Something more than just therapy?" Abigail nodded, lost in thought. "I'm considering it, but there's a part of me that can't shake off the feeling that maybe she's onto something. What if there is something in her house?" Kevin reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You're letting it get to you. Remember, you're the therapist. You can't let your patient's fears become your own." Abigail smiled, a weak attempt to dispel the growing dread. "You're right. It's just been a long day." As the evening progressed, their conversation drifted to safer, more mundane topics, but the earlier discussion hung in the air like a thick fog, refusing to dissipate. When they finally retired to bed, Abigail found herself staring at the ceiling, the darkness of the room feeling oppressive, suffocating. She turned to look at Kevin, his form a shadowy silhouette in the darkness. Even in sleep, he seemed distant, unreachable. Abigail felt a chill run down her spine, an inexplicable sense of isolation enveloping her. The night stretched on, the ticking of the clock in the hallway unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Abigail's mind raced, images of Ashley's terrified face mingling with the shadows that seemed to dance just at the edge of her vision. Sleep eluded her, the events of the day replaying in her mind, each time more distorted, more sinister. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving Abigail trapped in a waking terror, the darkness of the room feeling alive with unspoken horrors. As dawn approached, with the first light creeping through the curtains, Abigail finally drifted into a restless sleep, the echoes of Ashley's fears whispering in her dreams, a symphony of dread that promised no escape. The morning sun did little to dispel the chill that had settled in Abigail's bones. As she jogged through the misty streets, her mind replayed the night's restless thoughts. She couldn't escape the image of Ashley haunted and terrorized by an unseen force. Returning home, the shower's warmth offered no comfort. The water seemed to whisper, mimicking the incoherent murmurs Ashley claimed to hear. Unsettled, Abigail headed to her office, the normalcy of routine failing to soothe her growing apprehension. The day's sessions passed in a blur, each patient's words echoing Ashley's terror. But it was Ashley's appointment that loomed over the day like a dark cloud. When she finally arrived, her appearance was more disheveled than before, her eyes wide with an unspoken horror. "Dr. Underwood," Ashley began, her voice a shaky whisper. "I found something this morning in my house." Abigail leaned forward, her professional demeanor masking her inner turmoil. "What did you find, Ashley?" "On the wall, in the living room. Symbols. Strange symbols like nothing I have ever seen." Ashley's hands trembled as she spoke. I think they're a message." "A message?" Abigail questioned, her skepticism warring with the creeping dread. "Yes, like it's trying to communicate." Ashley's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I think it wants something from me." Abigail's mind raced. Was this a breakthrough in Ashley's delusions, or something far more sinister? "Have you considered the possibility that someone could be playing a prank on you, maybe kids from the neighborhood?" Ashley shook her head vigorously. "No, it's not possible. I've checked the locks, the windows. Everything's always locked. And the symbols, they're too deliberate." There was a pause, a heavy, charged silence. Abigail felt a shiver run down her spine, the room suddenly colder. "Perhaps," Abigail suggested cautiously, "I could come over. Take a look at these symbols myself. It might help to have another perspective." Ashley's eyes widened, a mix of hope and fear. "Would you?" I think it might help. But I'm scared, Dr. Underwood. Scared of what you might find." Feeling a sense of responsibility that went beyond the therapist's chair, Abigail made a decision. She stepped out into the hallway, pulling out her phone to call Kevin. The corridor felt colder than usual, the light flickering slightly as she dialed. "Kevin, it's me," Abigail spoke softly into the phone. "I'll be home late tonight. I'm going to Ashley's house to check on something. She found strange symbols on her wall. I need to see it for myself." Kevin's voice, usually a source of comfort, seemed distant, a faint echo in the chilling hallway. "Be careful, Abigail," he said. "Call me if you need anything." Returning to the office, Abigail found Ashley pacing nervously. "We'll go to your house together," Abigail said, her voice more confident than she felt. "Let's see if we can make sense of these symbols." The drive to Ashley's house was tense, the silence between them filled with unspoken fears. The sky was overcast, the clouds heavy with the threat of a storm. When they arrived, the house looked desolate, the windows like unblinking eyes staring into a void. As they stepped inside, a sense of wrongness permeated the air, a heaviness that made breathing seem like a laborious task. Abigail's heart pounded in her chest as they approached the living room. But when they entered, the wall was bare. There, "There were symbols here, I swear," Ashley stammered, her voice tinged with desperation. "They were right here." Abigail examined the wall closely, her fingers tracing over the cold, smooth surface. There was no trace of any markings, no residue of ink or paint. The room felt charged, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "Are you sure, Ashley?" Abigail asked gently, a creeping sensation of unease taking hold of her. "Yes, I'm sure," Ashley insisted, her eyes darting around the room as if the symbols might suddenly reappear. Abigail stepped back, surveying the room. The normality of it was jarring, a stark contrast to Ashley's vivid descriptions. Yet, the atmosphere was anything but normal. It felt as though the room was hiding its secrets, the walls whispering tales of shadows and unseen watchers. Abigail gave the room one last scrutinizing look, but it revealed nothing out of the ordinary. The rest of the house, too, bore no signs of anything amiss. Everything was as it should be. Yet the feeling that something was not right lingered. Driving home, Abigail contemplated the situation. It was becoming increasingly clear that Ashley might need more serious help than she had initially thought. The idea of installing a video surveillance camera in Ashley's house surfaced in her mind. It could serve a dual purpose, providing Ashley with some peace of mind and possibly capturing evidence of whatever was causing her distress. Abigail mulled over this plan, considering the best way to suggest it to Ashley. She knew it was a delicate matter, but the lack of any physical evidence at Ashley's house left her with few alternatives. She needed to approach this carefully, ensuring that Ashley felt supported and not more distressed. The drive home felt longer than usual, the road stretching out endlessly before her. The sky darkened as she neared her home, the day's light fading into a dusky twilight. The questions about Ashley's case lingered in her mind, unresolved and ominous, like the gathering clouds above. The following workday found Abigail Underwood sitting in her office, her mind a turbulent sea amidst the calm of her surroundings. Her patients came and went, each with their own stories and tribulations. But throughout it all, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ashley. Despite her best efforts to maintain professional detachment, Abigail found herself increasingly concerned about the young artist in a way that went beyond the usual therapist-patient relationship. As she listened to her patients offering words of comfort and guidance, Ashley's troubled face haunted the back of her mind. Abigail realized that her concern for Ashley had begun to take on a more personal nature, akin to a sisterly affection. She knew this insight was unprofessional, yet she couldn't help but feel a deep empathy for Ashley's plight. The thought that Ashley might truly be in danger, either from an external threat or from her own mind, weighed heavily on Abigail. After a day filled with half-heard conversations and distracted acknowledgments, Abigail made a decision. She left the office as soon as her last patient left, her steps quick, with purpose. Driving to a nearby electronics store, she purchased a small surveillance camera, a simple, unobtrusive device, yet one that she hoped would provide some much-needed answers or, at the very least, peace of mind for Ashley. With the camera securely in her bag, Abigail drove to Ashley's house. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low as if reflecting her own troubled thoughts. She arrived at the house, the building looking forlorn and unwelcoming, but she pushed aside her unease and knocked on the door. Ashley opened it, her eyes reflecting surprise and a flicker of hope. "Dr. Underwood, what brings you here?" "I brought something for you," Abigail said, her tone gentle. She held out the camera, explaining its purpose. "Now, I thought this might help. You can install it in your home, and it'll let you see for yourself that you're the only one here. It's for your peace of mind." Ashley took the camera, turning it over in her hands. "You really think this will help?" "I hope so," Abigail replied sincerely. "It's a way to confirm that what you're experiencing isn't isn't due to an intruder or something of that sort. Ashley nodded slowly, a mixture of gratitude and apprehension in her eyes. "Thank you, Dr. Underwood. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she said, a warm smile on her face. "Just know that I'm here to help in any way I can." As Abigail left Ashley's house, she felt a small sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead was still uncertain. The drive home was quiet, the earlier anxiety replaced by a cautious hope. Yet in the back of her mind, the shadows of doubt and fear still lurked, unbanished by the simple act of giving a camera. She arrived home as dusk was settling in, the world around her cloaked in shades of gray. The day's events replayed in her mind, a loop of concern and care for a young woman who was quickly becoming more than just a patient. In the deepening twilight, Abigail realized that her journey with Ashley was far from over, and the path ahead was shrouded in an unsettling fog of the unknown. The morning light brought no solace to Abigail. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt tainted by the shadows of the previous night. She sat at the kitchen table, her coffee untouched, staring blankly at the swirling steam as it rose like phantoms from the cup. Her phone rang, slicing through the silence. It was Ashley. "Dr. Underwood, I did what you said. I set up a camera inside a teddy bear. It's all I had." Ashley's voice trembled over the line. Abigail's heart sank. "And?" "Nothing. It recorded nothing. But I just know it's still here," Ashley whispered, the fear in her voice palpable even through the phone. Abigail sighed, a mix of frustration and concern. "Keep it running, Ashley. We'll figure this out." After the call, Abigail tried to go about her day. She took a walk in the park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. But the beauty of nature did little to ease her mind. Ashley's fear, the house's suffocating presence, it all lingered in her thoughts, an ever-present shadow. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She turned frequently, her eyes scanning the park, but there was nothing, just the normal sea of joggers and dog walkers, oblivious to the darkness that seemed to cling to her. Returning home, she found a message from Kevin on the answering machine. He apologized for another night shift, his voice tired but ever supportive. She tried to laugh at his joke about deserving a pay raise for all his hard work, but it came out hollow, forced. The house felt too quiet, too empty. She tried reading, but the words blurred before her eyes, her mind replaying her visits to Ashley's house. The vanishing symbols, the inexplicable cold. Night fell, and with it came a deepening of the shadows. Abigail tried to sleep, but every creak and groan of the house set her heart racing. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence that seemed to whisper secrets in a language she couldn't understand. In the darkness, her mind conjured images of the symbols on Ashley's wall, twisting and turning into grotesque shapes. She could almost hear Ashley's voice, the tremor of unrelenting fear, and the deeper, more sinister whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The clock ticked on, each second stretching into eternity. Sleep was a stranger in the room, kept at bay by the lingering thoughts that haunted her. The house's silence was oppressive, a tangible presence that seemed to watch her, waiting. As dawn's first light crept into the room, Abigail realized she had spent the entire night awake, trapped in a cycle of fear and confusion. The morning brought no relief, only a deepening sense of dread for what the day might hold. The secrets of the house, of Ashley's terror, clung to her like a second skin, a constant reminder that some horrors were not confined to the darkness of the night. The day passed in a blur for Abigail, her thoughts ensnared by the haunting enigma of Ashley's situation. The sessions with her other patients felt distant, as if she were separated from them by an invisible veil. Her every moment was shadowed by the specter of the unexplainable events at Ashley's house. As evening drew near, a sense of foreboding clung to her like a cold mist. She half expected to return to an empty house, but to her surprise, she found Kevin's car parked in the driveway. The sight should have brought relief, but instead, it added to the surreal quality of her day. Stepping inside, the aroma of cooked food greeted her, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness she had anticipated. "Kevin," she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the hallway. "In here," came his reply from the kitchen. Abigail found Kevin standing over the stove, a pot simmering gently. He turned and smiled at her, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I thought I'd surprise you with dinner," he said. The normalcy of the scene was jarring. Abigail forced a smile, her mind still trapped in the shadows of Ashley's house. That's wonderful, thank you." They sat down to eat, but Abigail's appetite had deserted her. She pushed the food around her plate, her mind racing. Kevin talked about his day, but his words were a distant murmur in her ears. "Kevin," she interrupted, "there's something about Ashley's case. It's not normal. The symbols, the feeling in her house, it's like something out of a horror story." Kevin paused, his fork midway to his mouth. "Maybe you're getting too involved. These things have a way of playing on your mind." "No, it's more than that," Abigail insisted, her voice rising with her frustration. "I can feel it. Something is very wrong." "I advised Ashley to install a camera in her house," she said, picking at her food. "She's done it, hidden inside a teddy bear. I'm hoping it might clear things up, provide some logical explanation." Kevin paused, his expression thoughtful. "That's a good idea. Maybe having some tangible evidence will help both of you understand what's going on." The conversation shifted to their past vacation, a feeble attempt to escape the present's unsettling reality. They talked of the Caribbean, the warm beaches, the escape from their demanding careers. But the memories felt distant, tainted by the darkness that now colored Abigail's world. As they were finishing dinner, Kevin's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his face turning grave. "I have to go. There's been a major car accident. They need all hands on deck." Abigail watched as he hurriedly left, a part of her wishing she could go with him to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the house. She was left alone with her thoughts, the silence of the house echoing louder than ever. The evening stretched on, the shadows growing deeper, more menacing. Abigail felt a creeping sensation, as if the house was watching her, its walls whispering secrets she couldn't quite hear. She tried to distract herself with television, but the images flickered and warped before her eyes, turning into grotesque shapes that danced in the dark corners of her mind. Abigail lay awake, trapped in a web of fear and confusion, the night stretching on into an endless abyss of terror and unanswered questions. The world outside Ashley's house was shrouded in an impenetrable darkness, the kind that seems to swallow sound and light whole. Inside, the only illumination came from the dim glow of a street lamp filtering through the curtains, casting long, twisted shadows across the room. Ashley lay in bed, her breathing shallow and uneven, a thin sheen of sweat covering her forehead. The teddy bear with the hidden camera sat on a dresser, its glassy eyes staring unblinkingly into the room, a silent guardian in the oppressive night. The clock on the bedside table ticked away the seconds, each one stretching out longer than the last. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting. Suddenly, the door to her bedroom creaked open, a slow, deliberate sound that shattered the silence. A figure stepped through, nothing more than a silhouette against the faint light from the hallway. It moved with a predatory grace, each step measured and silent. The figure stopped at the foot of Ashley's bed, the street lamp's light revealing its features. It was Kevin, Abigail's husband. He was dressed in black, a stark contrast to his usually warm and comforting presence. His face was expressionless, his eyes cold and detached. He stood there for a moment, watching Ashley sleep, his presence an ominous shadow in the dimly lit room. Then, In a whisper that was almost tender, he said, "I regret that you installed that camera, Ashley." From his jacket, he pulled out a plastic bag, the material glinting dully in the light. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he were savoring the moment. Ashley stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Confusion gave way to terror as she saw Kevin looming over her. She opened her mouth to scream, but before a sound could escape her lips, Kevin moved with startling speed. The plastic bag was over her head, his hands gripping it tightly, sealing her fate. Her struggles were frantic, desperate, but they weakened with each passing second. Kevin watched her, his expression unchanging, as the life drained from her body. When it was over, he stood up, the bag still in his hand. He moved to the kitchen, his steps still silent. He opened the fridge and took out a tub of ice cream, returning to the bedroom. He sat in a chair, facing the lifeless body on the bed, and began to eat the ice cream, each spoonful methodical and precise. His face showed no emotion, no hint of remorse or satisfaction. He simply sat there, eating, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. In the corner, the teddy bear's camera recorded it all, a silent witness to the horror that had unfolded in the room. The night stretched on, the darkness outside merging with the darkness within, a symphony of silence and death. Kevin finished his ice cream, placed the empty tub on the floor, and stood up. He looked at Ashley one last time, a long, lingering gaze, before turning to the teddy bear. With deliberate care, he picked it up, the camera still hidden inside, and tucked it under his arm. He then walked out of the room, the teddy bear in tow, leaving behind a chilling void where once there had been life. The first light of dawn streamed through the curtains, casting a soft glow across Abigail's room. She stirred from a restless sleep, her dreams having been a chaotic mix of shadows and whispers. Despite the unease that clung to her from the night, the morning brought a semblance of peace, a brief respite from the turmoil. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Abigail padded to the kitchen, her movements slow, still half entangled in the remnants of her dreams. The silence of the house enveloped her, a quiet that was both comforting and unsettling. As she reached for the morning newspaper, her gaze fell upon Kevin's car in the driveway. A surge of relief washed over her. He was supposed to be at the hospital all night, and his unexpected return was a welcome surprise. With the newspaper in hand, she turned back to the kitchen, only to find Kevin there, a joyful smile on his face and a bouquet of vibrant flowers in his hands. "For you, my love," he said, his voice warm and tender. Abigail felt a wave of emotion swell within her. The sight of the flowers, the sound of Kevin's voice, it was a balm to her frayed nerves. "Kevin, this is wonderful. I love you so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so glad you're here. I needed this." "I love you very much," he said, his voice light. Kevin's smile widened. Another doctor was hired at the clinic. "No more night shifts for me," he declared, the joy in his voice failing to reach his eyes. They embraced, the warmth of the hug melting away some of the lingering anxiety from the previous night. Kevin's presence, solid and reassuring, grounded her. What Abigail couldn't see was the predatory, almost evil smile that slowly contorted his features. It was a smile that belonged to the night and its hidden horrors, a reminder that the shadows were never too far away.